I've been given the difficult task to tell you what is the vision of the Club of Rome. That is difficult because after its founding in 1968, the Club of Rome is really an informal association of independent individuals, so each of them has his own opinion. What I think joins them is that they're interested in contributing in a systemic, interdisciplinary, and holistic way to ensuring a better world in the future. And the original aim of the crucial problems determining the future of humanity, what was called then is still called the Problématique, and then after an analysis tried to suggest possible futures. I think things have changed considerably since that time. I think over time we have expanded beyond assessing future risk, which we're very good at doing, to more trying to propose practical solutions to a challenge identified. So we feel very much in tune with the idea of this meeting, which is looking for a new paradigm, and so we feel that that is a very interesting exercise. I'll tell you a little bit about how a club works. I know some of you know this, but some of you might not. The club publishes its finding in reports, and since its inception in 1968, has published about 35 reports, 33 reports to be. And perhaps the most famous of this report is the one that many people have mentioned, which is Limits to Growth, which is the 1962 study of done at MIT. And the part that is in everybody's mind about the Club of Rome is the results of this report, which showed that by means of a system analysis of the world, that in fact, if you have a continuing industrial production growing and a continuing population growth, eventually the system overshoots and collapses. And this is essentially being the hallmark of the Club of Rome. And in fact, all the reports of the Club of Rome in the last 40 years or so have helped support what Limits to Growth has shown us, and also the general ideas of the Club of Rome. And although all of these reports cover many different topics, there are really three areas that they cover, which will give you a sense of the thinking of the Club of Rome. First, there are some methodological and systemic studies of planetary limits. So we are in the limits business, and so we talk about planetary limits. Second, there are some studies of governance of the system of the world. We don't understand how the world really works, and we would like to make it work better. And finally, the moment brought up in the last session, there are reports on values, because values underpin much of the things that the Club of Rome does. So I'll give you some little examples of things that of recent reports that reflect these three things: limits, governance, and values. So the report in 2013, a recent report of the Club of Rome by Johan Rockström and Anders Wickman, called Bankrupting Nature, Denying Our Planetary Boundaries, is a good example of a limits kind of report. Basically what Wickman and Rockström do is they show that we are neglecting some real boundaries, planetary boundaries, and by doing this way, basically we're heading in the direction of the world. So this is an example of the reports of the Club of Rome that deals with limits. A good example of a report that was written long ago on governance was a report that was basically by Jan Tinbergen, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, and it was about the governance of the world, and it was called Reshaping the International Order, or REAL. And basically Tinbergen said that unless you change the way the world goes, you will never get rid of inequities. And so there was a long study on how inequities need a new system of global governance. And the good example of a report on values is a report that has not come out yet by David Korten, which is called Change the Story, Change the Future. And in the case of Korten's book, he delivers a very clear and compelling message that unless we change our way of thinking, again, we're going in the wrong direction. And according to Korten, he has a very nice and sort of poetic way of putting things. He says, we must change the present societal paradigm of sacred money and markets into a new paradigm, a new story based on and living earth. Sacred life and living earth. So it's very much more a question of values. Are the values that we now have, are they the right values? Now, besides publishing reports, we go to meetings, and then we try to shape the ongoing worldwide discussion on the future of the planet by basically fostering a number of projects. And at the moment, we have 3 projects, more or less cooking. That means some of them may not turn out very well, so we will continue cooking in a different way. These projects, they have a large overlap among each other, and they also have a large overlap with the activities of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences and other such institutions. So the 3 general projects we have is, first of all, we're trying to figure out exactly how you could redefine the world economy. It is very difficult to imagine that we really will come from an ab initio new economy. Perhaps what we should really do is start from where we want to be and then try to figure out what steps to do. The second kind of large project is something that doesn't have a good title, but I hope that you understand. It's called securing livelihood. It really has to do with employment. Livelihood is not a good word. Gary, you have a better turn of words. Think of a better word for livelihood. But again, there's a question of how do we manage the great unemployment problems in the world. And the final problem that we are engaging in is the whole idea of decoupling or of well-being from resource consumption, essentially a study of efficiency. So let me end by making a few comments on each of these things so that you get a sense of what we are cooking. On trying to find alternative model of economic development, basically we focus on a number of things. One of the things that is the real tug of war that we have now between improving well-being and consuming resources. Something's got to give. And so is there a better way to attack that thing? The other question, which is again a difficult question on the economy, is a question of how do you minimize inequities? We are not doing very well since Tinbergen's study in 1976, which is almost 40 years ago, was already trying to figure out how to get rid of inequities. There's a question about corporations and the way that they work. And the question is, can you do better if you look at things at the local level? That there are good, interesting models of small level corporations that are much more attentive to the stakeholders and the shareholders, not these big monsters like Chandana was saying. So the question is, can one do something in that area? And the finance sector is inventing itself and just makes money. So there's plenty of money. The question is, the money is not going to the real economy. So how can you change this? So these are some of the issues we're grappling. We'll try to make some progress, but they're difficult issues. And the question is, will this, in the end, will the end result of this study, if we ever get to complete it, will it be a new modified capitalist system or something else? I think we better call it modified capitalist system. Doesn't sound like a good title. We need a better name than that. All right, so that's about economy. The second general topic is livelihood, securing livelihoods, employment, and incomes. The idea is how can you organize things in the world in which you can provide everyone with purpose and a sufficient income. Purpose is more important than income. And the question is, can you do that? You're going to have different policies for low-income countries to high-income countries where, in fact, you must redefine what work is. And again, one of the themes there is we must redefine what do we mean by wealth and incomes. For example, one of the really intricacies of most of the system in the world is that we tax labor and we do not tax resources. If we tax resources, we will be much better off. So again, there are issues like this that people are discussing. And finally, let me finish by saying some things on decoupling well-being from resource depletion. We are working on a number of things. Rob Hoffman is actually working on a model changes to see whether you can actually see whether you do better if you can decouple as much as you can for efficiency, resource consumption from well-being. But you can also, there are other efforts promoting what is called a circular economy or the performance economy, in which you design things from the beginning in a way which is efficient. You are efficient in the way you extract resources, you are efficient in the way you make objects, you're efficient in the way you dispose of objects. In fact, most things we should not buy, we should lease, and then have a company provide a replacement. So the question is, can we do better? The ultimate goal is that we're reducing the ecological footprint for humanities, but whether we can sufficiently give ideas on policies to implement decoupling will be interesting to see. I'll finish by saying just a couple of things, just a couple of numbers on decoupling, if that's all right. If you just look at materials, during the 20th century, we increased material extraction by a factor of about 8. Now, we cannot do the same thing in the coming century. Already, the stress on world material resources is such that to extract minerals, for example, we produce 3 times more junk than we used to produce in the beginning of the century. So we are completely overwhelmed by things. And if you look at some data from the International Resources Panel from UNEP, if we look at all resources, each of us per capita are consuming 8 tons of stuff. You, Munir, are consuming 8 tons. Maybe you consume less. But I for sure consume 8 tons, which is not good. Now, if we continue with the present rate of resource use, in 2050 we will be consuming 3 times the number of resources, and we cannot afford that. Our footprint cannot afford that. So if you can get some moderate decoupling in 2050, we should still consume 8 tons, not 16 tons, which is what business as usual do. So we will need to have a decoupling by a factor of 2. Now, a factor of 2 in 35 years is 2% a year. That looks achievable, but it's not easy. So I'll give you one example, and I'll finish with that. In 1974, 40 years ago, the California legislature passed a bill called the Alquist-Warren Act, in which they established the California Energy Commission, basically to promote efficiency, promote renewables. And as a result of that, there's been great changes in efficiency of use of energy in California. And I'll give you an example which I like because it contrasts Texas with California. Texas passed no such laws. California passed these laws creating a commission. Now, today, Texas consumes per capita in 1 year 475 million BTUs. California consumes a factor of 2 less, about 228 million BTUs. So we did achieve a factor of 2% per year, slowly. Texas is still what it is. If the United States had adopted the same ways as California, they would consume 3/4 of energy they consume now, and we would have saved the world 5%. So decoupling is possible, and so some of these are some of the ideas we're thinking about. In this case, what makes it possible is legislation and regulation. So again, these are some of what the Club of Rome is trying to do. Thank you.